Hey, folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream. So many hot spots in the world right now. Russia, Ukraine, obviously, we'll talk more about that in a second. Gaza, of course, and what's happening there. Potential hotspot, China and Taiwan, and then Yemen, of course, still embroiled in all sorts of chaos, and then Syria. Look, a rapid fire advance back in early December, a few weeks before Christmas, this new jihadi regime in Syria took charge over most of the country, including Damascus, the capital. Bashar al-Assad fled to Moscow, and things have not quite stabilized there because Israel, rightly, is very concerned about this new jihadi regime in Syria. And there's some major developments there, folks, that I think could have far-reaching ramifications. Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes in Syria since Assad fell in December, in only about 3 months. And look, for the decade plus before that, Israel had also carried out hundreds, if not thousands, into the thousands of airstrikes by that time against the Assad regime, its assets, and specifically Iran and Hezbollah's assets. Now, Iran and Hezbollah have been chased out of Syria. Assad's gone. But the Sunni jihadi regime that's now in power has links to al-Qaeda. Enough said. I don't want to say it's exactly meet the new boss, same as the old boss, as the WHO once said, but it ain't good. And look, two sides of the same coin. Iran, Hezbollah, Shia jihadis, the new regime, Sunni jihadis. Now, Iran, obviously, Hezbollah had much greater capabilities than this new government in Syria, but this new regime has a very powerful friend in the form of Turkey. So could we see a showdown? We've discussed this previously on the live stream. Could we see a showdown in the offing eventually between Israel and Turkey over Syria? Now, I'm not saying a full-blown military confrontation. That's not what I'm saying. But two things here to remember. Number one, Turkey is close to these jihadis who now have taken power over a good chunk of Syria, at least. And Turkey wants to project power. Turkey wants to reestablish what it sees as its rightful rule. And I'm saying in particular, I should be even more particular, folks. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the strongman Islamist leader of Turkey. He wants to reassert what he sees as Turkey's rightful position as leader of the Muslim world, as head of a revived Ottoman Empire. Remember, the last Ottoman caliphate, the seat of it was in Turkey. So Erdogan's got grand goals and ambitions far beyond Asia Minor. And Syria is one way that he can extend that influence throughout the region. He really wants to reestablish the caliphate. Now, he's had chances. Well, he thought he had chances. Let's say that. One big chance with the Arab Spring. I've called it the Islamist winter. Started late 2010, Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Syria. And Erdogan was thrilled at the time because in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood took power. In Tunisia, Muslim Brotherhood aligned groups took power. In Libya, we had the Brotherhood, al-Qaeda types on the march. And then in Jordan, we had the regime looking shaky. Although the regime in Syria, the government in Jordan has looked shaky for a long, long time, but thank God they managed to hang on because life post the Hashemite kingdom doesn't look too promising in Jordan post King Abdullah. So he's someone who's essentially keeping the peace there, and Jordan's security services and military are strong enough for sure to have helped him maintain power. Nonetheless, Erdogan was encouraged because he saw chess pieces moving and dominoes toppling and Islamist regimes coming to power. So he's thinking, hey, caliphate time? Remember, he's a radical Islamist of the Muslim Brotherhood stripe, and he saw his comrades coming to power all of a sudden throughout the region. He thought the Arab Spring, again, I call it the Islamist winter because that's what it turned out to be, may have been the start of something big that would lead to a united Islamic world, which also is known as a caliphate. Now, a caliphate, it's basically that. It's a union of all Islamic nations, and it's united under one supreme ruler known as the caliph. The caliph leads the caliphate, and Erdogan fancies himself as a modern day caliph. He thought he might have a moment there, 2011, 2012, and then 2013, and then the Arab Spring slowly unraveled. Mohammed Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood leader, was overthrown in Egypt. Tunisia, the regime there changed hands. And the Brotherhood, once the Brotherhood was smashed in Egypt, and General, now President Sisi, did exactly that in 2013. Hey, 2 revolutions within the span of 2 years in Egypt. That's how chaotic it was. Once Morsi was thrown out and the Brotherhood was trampled, look, Egypt was the birthplace and the main power seat of the Brotherhood movement throughout the world. All of a sudden, the wind was taken out of their sails. The balloon was deflated, so to speak. And Erdogan said, uh-oh, my caliphate dreams have been put on hold. And then, out of the ashes of the Arab Spring Islamist winter, not long after, Erdogan saw another chance. ISIS formed what it called a caliphate, a mini Islamic state governed by the harshest form imaginable of Sharia law. It covered some 58,000 square miles in Iraq and Syria, an area roughly the size of Great Britain or the size of the state of Indiana here in the United States, where I'm sitting right now. So ISIS was on the march. And Erdogan had a hand in that. He can deny it all he wants. But folks, there is no doubt that Erdogan, who leads, helpful reminder, a NATO member nation, the second largest military in NATO behind only the United States, Erdogan allowed foreign fighters to flow over the Turkish border into Syria. Hundreds, if not thousands, of Europeans, yes, Americans as well, young jihadis who were attracted to the ISIS caliphate, this mini caliphate. And what Erdogan was doing, I think, and I think what he's doing now in Syria is, look, he wears a suit and tie. He's not a guy in a cave with an AK-47. He's a diplomat. He's an international leader. He's a statesman in his view. That's the stealthy Muslim Brotherhood way. Folks, I've interviewed Muslim Brotherhood leaders in Europe in the past. Suits, ties, Western educated, eloquent, well-spoken. They don't come off as radical, but they are very much so. But they have a stealth jihad where they try to fit in to the surrounding nation and at least look like they fit in with the intent and goal of destroying that society from within. Stealthy, incrementally. They're patient. They'll wait years, decades. Whereas the likes of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they want it now. They want jihad now. They want to blow you up now. They want power now. They have no interest in waiting and playing the long game like the Muslim Brotherhood does. So we saw ISIS do exactly that, the latter strategy. And Erdogan was saying to himself, okay, let ISIS clear the way, conquer as much territory as possible. I'll allow them to conquer as much territory as possible. And then I will swoop in and take power over this caliphate that they're forming under the pretext maybe of it's a national security interest for Turkey to be in there. And always he uses the Kurds. Well, I have to enter Syria. I have to enter Iraq because of the Kurds. The Kurds are attacking us. He's got a homicidal hatred for the Kurdish people, does Erdogan. So that was the grand plan. And then came Donald Trump and the ISIS caliphate was smashed. So Arab Spring devolved. ISIS smashed its physical caliphate in the Middle East. Now, does he have a new opening in Syria with the new regime of Mohammed al-Golani that's taken power only in December, actually. And Erdogan is exercising a good amount of influence there. So if he's exercising a good amount of influence there, He essentially, Turkey has supplanted Iran in Syria. For well over a decade, Syria was the linchpin of Iran's entire regional strategy, remember. And now Iran's essentially been evicted from Syria. And Israel, in my view, is swapping one mortal foe for another, because Turkey now will be the power player eventually in Syria at Israel's doorstep. And here's the elephant in the room. And by the way, when I say mortal foe, not the Turkish people, just as the Iranian people are not Israel's enemy, it's these two radical regimes that, in a way, are vying for regional supremacy. Which brings me to the elephant in the room, as I mentioned a moment ago, the prophetic implications. What do you think? We've got a highly educated audience here, a very prophetically attuned audience. Does prophecy demand that Turkey be opposed to Israel and set up shop at Israel's doorstep? What do you think? I'd love to get your thoughts there, because we're going to unpack that a little bit more. In the meantime, know this, that Israel's very active. And if we say, hey, the more Israel strikes these jihadis in Syria, the more it will enrage their Turkish friends. Well, here's the latest. You see it in the title today in the thumbnail. Israel has, I'm just reading this straight off my phone, Israel has carried out airstrikes near Syria's Mediterranean port city of Tartus. And Israel today, the Israeli military said as much. Look, they said, quote, we struck a military site where weapons belonging to the previous Syrian regime were stored in the area of Kardaha, which was the hometown of Bashar al-Assad, who's now in exile in Moscow. Syrian state news agency reported that airstrikes carried out by, quote, Israeli occupation aircraft on the surroundings of Tartus city. They happened, no losses, human losses that we know of, but this continues. Last Tuesday, the Israeli army said it carried out airstrikes against military sites containing weapons in southern Syria, just days after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called for, quote, demilitarizing the area. Israel has made very clear, folks, they've drawn a red line here. We will not permit jihadis. Look, we learned the harsh lessons of October 7th and its aftermath, with Hamas and Hezbollah perched on our borders, ready to invade on the ground. Hamas did invade on the ground October 7th, and Hezbollah wanted to do the same thing in the north. And Israel says, look, we've learned the lessons. We are not going to allow ever again a hostile jihadi force, be it Shia or Sunni, set up shop on our borders. It ain't happening. Now, Israel's resolved that problem in Gaza and Lebanon, or is well on its way to doing that, as it has really smashed Hamas and Hezbollah, and more coming with Hamas, I believe, soon. Where, with the full backing of the Trump administration, by the way, I mean, the Trump administration saying, go for it, finish the job. I think Israel's going to do exactly that in the coming weeks. We'll see how it plays out with the hostage crisis, the hostage situation. But eventually, no matter how that shakes out, Israel is going to administer the final blow, the death blow to Hamas. And with Hezbollah, look, they're still holding mass funerals. Nasrallah last week and other jihadi fighters. I think Hezbollah, we knew they were hit hard in Lebanon. Folks, I think they were wounded even more than we knew. There have been reports that Hezbollah has lost 2/3 of its military capabilities, and I think it might be more than that. They're in bad, bad shape. I say all that to say, Israel's not about, with all the hard work, blood and sweat that Israel put into since 2011, making sure that Iranian-aligned forces did not set up shop on the Syrian border and duplicate what Hamas and Hezbollah had done in Gaza and Lebanon, respectively. Don't think for a second all of a sudden Israel is going to take its foot off the gas and allow, it didn't let Assad and Iran and Hezbollah set up shop on the Israel-Syria border. Don't for a second think it's suddenly going to let these al-Qaeda-linked jihadis set up shop in the Golan, on the Syrian side of the Golan. It's not happening. That's why Israel has formed these buffer zones in Gaza, in Lebanon, and yes, in Syria, in the shadow of mighty Mount Hermon. And I'll tell you what, there is the real possibility right now that Israel comes into military conflict if these jihadis in Syria breach that buffer zone that Israel has set up. And it's a buffer zone. It's a security perimeter, essentially, to prevent these jihadis from getting close to the Jewish state. Hello, common sense. But now these jihadis are threatening a dear friend and ally of the state of Israel. That's the Druze people. Druze communities not too far from Damascus in southern Syria are being threatened right now, menaced by this new jihadi regime in Damascus. And Israel is saying, if you dare, we're going to step into this. And we could have a little showdown there. And then what does Turkey think of that? We've got a lot to discuss. Also, some fallout from my comments about Russia, Ukraine, the Zelensky Trump Vance meeting last Friday, and the reaction I got there. I want to break that down as well. Before I do, hey, we're talking about the struggles on Israel's borders. And really, Israel's been fighting a war on 7 fronts, not just Syria, Gaza, and Lebanon, which I named, but Iraq, Judea, Samaria, the biblical heartland, Yemen, and of course, Iran itself. 7 fronts. Israel, a tiny nation the size of the state of New Jersey, fighting on 7 fronts in the past 16 months since the October 7th massacre. And that's where our partner for today's live stream, Magen David Adom, comes in. Look, 7-front war. Well, Magen David Adom is on the front lines on every front practically. They are Israel's emergency services system. What does that mean? Every time there's a rocket attack, a terror attack, a car ramming, a car accident, a heart attack, terror, non-terror, anytime something bad happens, Magen David Adom are the first ones on the ground helping, providing aid, assistance. They are Israel's first responders. Look, they dispatch every ambulance in the country, every one. And I'm in Israel frequently. I see these Magen David Adom ambulances everywhere. Not only that, they control, collect, distribute Israel's blood supply, not only for civilians, but for the IDF as well. Folks, as you can tell, this is an organization that is absolutely indispensable to the survival of the state of Israel. I do not exaggerate. You want to help? SaveLivesIsrael.com. That's SaveLivesIsrael.com. Biblical mandate, Genesis 12:3, a foundational verse of what we do here on the Watchman newscast. I will bless those who bless Israel. I will curse those who curse Israel. Very clear. And you want to bless Israel? You want to fulfill that biblical mandate? Magen David Adom, can't think of a better way to start. SaveLivesIsrael.com. And remember, this is a majority volunteer force. Some 90% of their 35,000 EMTs, paramedics, and first responders are volunteers. These are brave men and women who are leaving their families for nothing more than to do good, to do God's work, and to bless their fellow countrymen and women. And guess what? They've paid a high price. We've had over 30, I think it's 35, 36. I'm sad to say at this point, Magen David Adom volunteers have lost their lives in the line of duty since October 7th. At least 17 ambulances have been destroyed, yet they're back every day on the front lines. Again, SaveLivesIsrael.com. Right now, I'm looking at the list. They need more ambulances. They need bandages. They need medical supplies. They're stretched thin in this time of war, in Israel's time of greatest need, and they need your help. SaveLivesIsrael.com. I am honored and proud to partner with our good friends at Magen David Adom for such a time as this. And what a time it is in southern Syria, where, look, Israel may be prepared to go toe-to-toe with this new jihadi regime in defense of the Druze people. Now, the Druze are a religious minority in Israel, mainly in the north, around the Syria-Lebanon border areas. I've been to the Druze areas many times. They're delightful people, great restaurants up there, great food, welcoming, and great soldiers. The Israeli Druze are extremely loyal citizens of the state of Israel, and they're amazing soldiers who've contributed greatly to the Israel Defense Forces. And the Druze, yet another example of the diversity of Israel. And Israel is really, in my view, the most diverse place on earth, quite possibly. Not only Jews of every shape, size, color, background, but Arabs, Druze. You've got everything in Israel, Muslims, Christians, all together. And you have every kind of person you can think of in the IDF. Yes, you do have Christians, and yes, you have some Muslim soldiers in the IDF as well. You have Arab Christians. It's just an amazing fighting force, and the Druze are a big part of that. And now they're under threat in Syria, right across the border from Israel. Here's more from the Middle East Eye. The Israeli army, I'm reading this off my phone again, that's why I'm looking down. The Israeli army has been ordered to prepare to defend a Druze majority city in southern Syria, close to the capital, Damascus, after violence broke out between locals and security services. Defense Minister Israel Katz said in a statement on Saturday that the city of Jaramana, located on the outskirts of Damascus, was currently under attack by Syrian regime forces. We will not allow, he said, Syria's extremist Islamist terror regime to harm the Druze. If the regime harms the Druze, it will be harmed by us. Wow. That's Israel's defense minister, folks, saying that to this new jihadi regime. And that was followed today by airstrikes, ensuring that this jihadi regime, again, al-Qaeda linked, does not get its claws into Bashar al-Assad's weapon stockpiles. Israel has destroyed, according to various accounts, 80, 90% of all of Assad's missiles and tanks and air force, everything, chemical weapon stockpiles in the past 3 months alone, ensuring, again, that fanatical al-Qaeda-linked jihadis don't get their hands on advanced weaponry, advanced at least by the standards of the Middle East. Very wise move by Israel to preemptively do this. And you see that Israel Katz, his threats against this new jihadi regime in Syria are backed up by teeth. There's bite behind it. There's action behind it. Look, this regime knows they've seen Israel operate over the past several months and smash Iran's ring of fire. And I think that they'll want to second guess, needless to say, coming against the Druze and other religious minorities in Syria. Because look, again, these are Sharia supremacists, meaning Islamic Sharia law for one and all, whether you like it or not. And they want to impose it not only on Syria, but ultimately the dream and the vision of Islamist fanatics is to impose it on the entire world. And by the way, in Europe right now, they're making a little bit of headway. We've been talking about this a bunch here in the live stream. And today, yet again, we had a car ramming attack in Mannheim, Germany, 2 people killed, 25 more at least injured. Now, the name of the attacker, surprise, surprise, has not been released, but there have been several other attacks in Germany, Austria, France, car ramming, stabbings, etc., over the past few weeks. And guess what they all had in common? They were all Islamic refugees, asylum seekers. Other plots were broken up against Israeli embassies and other spots. And now we're in the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, which I'm sad to say has often seen an increase in terror attacks during that month. So add it up, but clearly the plan here is global, not just regional. And speaking of which, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, as we bring it full circle here, yes, the ultimate goal of the caliphate is global. They're nowhere near that right now. I get it. But these are very patient individuals. And Erdogan, I believe, if he sees the new regime that really he helped empower in Syria, if he sees them coming under the gun, quite literally, courtesy of the Israel Defense Forces, would he move troops into Syria? Not expecting to go toe-to-toe with Israel, but as a show of force and a way to deter Israel. Look, Israel doesn't want to tangle with a NATO member nation. Although Israel is a stronger military than Turkey, Turkey is nothing to sneeze at. Again, second largest military in NATO. So it would not be an easy go for Israel. I don't think it would come to that. but it would be awful tense. And when I say it wouldn't come to that, at least at first, I think long-term, I asked you the question of the prophetic implications. Long-term, we talk about Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39, talks about this invasion, this latter days, Ezekiel says, invasion of Israel. It's called the War of Gog and Magog. Funny name, I know. And there are varying opinions on who's involved, who's not in this latter days invasion force that comes against Israel. And by the way, spoiler alert, it doesn't end very well for them. Just know that. Russia is the wild card where some say Russia is going to be in this force. Some say it's not. Look, Russia right now, a great relationship with Turkey and Iran. I wouldn't say great with Turkey, but cordial because they have shared interests. So will the Russian regime, the Russian military be involved in this invasion force? A lot of different interpretations there. What everyone seems to agree on is that Iran and Turkey will indeed be involved. So as you watch these prophetic chess pieces move and you watch Turkey's turn, bear that in mind. But here's an interesting little nugget, speaking of Turkey and Russia. Real quick. Now, this was reported last week. Reuters, for what it's worth, and others reported that Israel actually has communicated to the Trump administration that it would like Russia to keep its military bases in Syria to offset Turkey's growing influence there. According to the report, Israeli officials believe that Syria's new Turkish-backed Islamist rulers pose a threat to the Jewish state's borders. And this has been communicated to the Trump administration. And they're saying, look, Russia's got military bases there. The fate of those bases has been in question ever since Russia's friend Bashar al-Assad was chased out of the country. He was hosting Russia, obviously. So Israel's saying, look, let Russia stay there to kind of offset Turkish influence. An interesting proposition on one hand, but on the other hand, Israel's been very concerned, with good reason, about the alliance between Russia and Iran. Russia has been openly aligned with Israel's greatest enemies. You can tell a lot about a man by the company he keeps. And Russia has been keeping company with Iran, China, North Korea, Hamas, Hezbollah, Assad. So I think Israel needs to be careful there, but reportedly Israel's trying to make inroads once again with the Russian government, with Putin. We shall see how that plays out. But that brings me, always an interesting topic. Friday, I talked about, it was titled Trump Boots Zelensky. And it was a well-deserved booting, in my opinion. I got a lot of pushback in the comments. It was half and half, I'd say. But a lot of people said, Stakelbeck, you're horrible. I'll never listen to you again. Zelensky's a hero, and he's like the modern-day George Washington. That's some of the feedback I got. Here's my take, just to reiterate. And I say this because you could say that Vladimir Putin is a very dangerous and bad man, which I believe, but that doesn't mean you support Zelensky and think he's a great guy. The two aren't mutually exclusive. Again, my take in a very, very short, brief nutshell, because we've gone long already, is that Zelensky was completely out of line and disrespectful in the Oval Office. And for a lot of the commenters who said, oh, Stakelbeck, you're wrong, Trump and Vance were bullies, did you actually watch the entire meeting, or did you watch a 2-minute soundbite clip? Because that meeting lasted about 45 minutes, if not more. I watched the entire thing. And throughout, Trump and Vance were gracious. They listened as Zelensky, in front of the media cameras, which was not by coincidence. He's a darling of the mainstream leftist media and the left wing and rhinos here in America and in Europe and the globalists around the world. He's a man of the left, is Zelensky. And he playing to the cameras, and he's kind of changing the parameters of what was discussed behind closed doors between he and Trump administration officials. All of a sudden on camera, he's striking a different tune. He wants security guarantees. Instead of just coming in, signing the rare earth minerals deal and going back to Kyiv, because signing that deal is a security guarantee in and of itself, because it means that U.S. Citizens would be on the ground in Ukraine mining for those materials, which means Russia won't attack because it doesn't want to get into a shooting war with the United States. How does Zelensky not see that? I'm not sure. Maybe he does. He just wants to keep the war going. But he does not seem open to a ceasefire in a war that he can't win. Look, the Ukrainians have fought valiantly over the past 3 years, but valiantly with hundreds of billions of aid and arms from America and Europe. And there comes a time where the blank check, I'm a U.S. taxpayer. There comes a time where the blank check has to end. And Trump is saying exactly that, especially when it's a meat grinder. 1 million people have died in 3 years, and you're sending your sons to die and die with no end in sight and no real chance of victory. What's the end game? These are common sense questions. And Zelensky came in, and I'm sorry, he was disrespectful. And he's cutting Trump off, and then they go at it. For the first 40 minutes of that press conference, all was well, and Trump and Vance were biting their tongues. And then he challenges Vance when Vance said, look, let's try and have some diplomacy here. And the thing went off the rails, of course. But bear in mind also that Trump here wants to break Russia off from China and Iran. Can he do it? I don't know. But he wants to try. He wants to distance Russia out of that orbit of the gathering storm coalition, as I've called them: Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. It's worth a try. Can he do it? We shall see. But Trump very wisely is saying, I'm going to split up our enemies. Try and pull Russia away from Iran and China. Is it possible? I don't know. Prophetically, what do you think? I'd love your thoughts. But that's the undercurrent here, folks, to keep in mind. So that's what you saw unfold. You've seen a lot of broken promises by Zelensky. And yes, ingratitude, when you receive hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. aid and you want hundreds of billions more. And if Zelensky had his way, there would be U.S. boots on the ground and fighter jets in the air over the skies of Ukraine and Russia, and would be on the precipice of World War III. Europe seems, look, they welcomed him with open arms yesterday. They seem all too willing to do that. Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, yeah, boots on the ground, fighter jets in the skies. Good luck. Instead of looking to wind this thing down and end the meat grinder, they want to extend this thing. And if they don't have American help, I'm not sure how far the weak, woke European bureaucrats will get in this quest. But again, good luck for it. And yet again, Ukraine has fought valiantly. Russia should have never invaded. An evil act. But now we're at the point where, where's this thing going? And the blank check's got to end. So I thought I articulated that pretty well on Friday. But also in terms of the bullying accusations, oh, those big bullies, I'm going to say this, and I might ruffle some feathers, but I'm going to tell it like it is. If you wanted me to mince words, you wouldn't watch. But I think a lot of times, especially in the church, there's a lot of people saying, I'm a conservative Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus, and they're bullies, they're mean, all this stuff. I'm going to tell you, I think there's a lot of pearl clutching in the church and the body of Christ these days. And I hate to say it, I think there's a lot of Christians. Look, and Trump and Vance aren't perfect. No one is. That's why we need a savior. But I like direct, forceful, strong leadership that sends a message. I'm sorry. I'm not. That's how. Actually, I'm not sorry. That gets things done. Weak men create hard times. And what was done in front of the cameras could have been done behind closed doors. But Zelensky got the ball rolling, and Trump said afterwards, I kept the cameras rolling because I wanted the world to see what I was dealing with, the intransigence. I'm trying to wind this thing down and save lives, and he wants to keep this thing going ad nauseum with U.S. unlimited backing and taxpayer money. So he said, I strategically let the cameras go. But in terms of the body of Christ, many times, I love my brothers and sisters in Christ, but I think there's a lot of people today that if they saw Jesus turn over the tables at the temple and chase out the money changers, they'd say, they'd be aghast. How could he do that? That was over the top. That was out of line. That was so aggressive. That was so mean. What a bully. And if they saw Jesus call the Pharisees a brood of vipers, they'd say, that kind of language isn't necessary. You've crossed the line. There's this soft mentality today in the church. And guess what? That's the reason we've lost so much ground. That's the reason that pulpit after pulpit was silent over the past 4 years as little kids were being mutilated and having their genders in some madness in an attempt to change their genders. And so many pulpits were silent. But people who aren't seen as traditional defenders of the faith, secular people on the conservative side, were the ones speaking out about these atrocities. People like Megyn Kelly, people like a Trump. And yet the church, well, we don't want to offend anyone. The gospel is offensive. So I'm sorry. My patience for that mindset is starting to dwindle because we're in a fight for our civilization. And we can't always be, my friend Steve Dace at The Blaze calls it, the sweater vest and pleated khakis crowd. They want to hear a nice sermon on Sunday and have a potluck afterwards and go home. And I'm sorry. Sometimes you need strong leadership and you need strong men who are willing to lead. And it might not always be nice and pleasant and kumbaya in the room when you're trying to defend the interest of your country. So I'm so sorry that Trump's a big bad bully and Vance is a big bad bully. Actually, I'm not sorry at all. I didn't get that at all from that exchange on Friday. I got two guys who were forcefully standing up for the best interest of their country, which they should do. They should put their country first, just as Zelensky should put his first, and Britain and France and everyone else. And Zelensky believes he is putting his country first. Look, the guy's trying to get all he can. He's in a horrific fight. He's trying to get the funding. I get it. But there comes a time where, where's this going? And whatever strategy, I don't know who advised him, his friends on the left, most likely before that meeting, but he handled that meeting all wrong. And Trump and Vance sent a strong message that it's a new day and America's not going to be taken advantage of anymore. You can't get a blank check. And we're trying to wind down. Trump was elected not to prolong wars, but to end them. So that's a little prologue to what I said on Friday. If you missed it, you can check out the live stream. They're all here in our archives. They're all right there. And I'm in America. Great thing about it is you can hate what I just said and completely disagree with it. I'm going to unsubscribe. You're terrible. It's a free country. That freedom was dwindling a bit. And then came November 5th and a landslide victory. And faith, family, and freedom are back on the docket. So thank God I can speak freely and express my view of things here in America. I hope you can too, wherever you're watching from around the world. But agree to disagree, still love you, all good. It's America, and great having you with us today. Until next time, hey, remember the Watchman merch. I keep forgetting to mention, but I think it's a 50% discount now. We've got hats, hoodies, T-shirts, mugs, some good stuff. 50% off by popular demand. We started this Watchman merch line, shop.tbn.org, I believe. Check that out. Keep this all in prayer, folks. Wow, is it an upside down, crazy world right now? But we'll be here with you, unpacking it all. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.